At some point before the end of the Anno Domini era, the world was gripped by a multitude of problems. Depletion of oil, pollution, recessions, ethnic violence, religious violence, and so on. All of this would result in the Third World War, a conflict that was also known as the Reconstruction War because it reshaped the world into the one we know from the Cosmic Era. New alliances were forged and new global powers would arise, with the most important ones being the Atlantic Federation consisting of the USA, Canada, Great Britain, Iceland, and Ireland, the Eurasian Federation consisting of Russia and most of the mainland European countries, and the Republic of East Asia consisting of Japan, China, South Korea, North Korea, Mongolia, and Taiwan. The other powers are the United States of South America, consisting of South America, the African Community consisting of North Africa, the South African Union consisting of South Africa, the Kingdom of Scandinavia consisting of Norway, Sweden, and Finland, the Equatorial Union consisting of South and Southeastern Asia, the Oceania Union consisting of spiders, other horrors that will kill you on sight, and my new favorite animal, the quokka. And finally, there was the Orb Union, consisting of the Solomon Islands. The war would reach its zenith when a nuclear weapon was used in the Kashmir region on the Central Asian front. This event became known as the Last Nuke and would serve as a push for the nations of Earth to resolve their conflicts in a more peaceful manner, lest such a tragedy would again be repeated. Still, despite this resolve, it would take another 9 years for the Third World War to finally come to a close, and with it, it was decided to adopt a new calendar, the Cosmic Era, with the starting year symbolically chosen as the year in which the Last Nuke was used. Also, the fighting wasn't the only thing causing massive casualties. During the war, a new type of influenza virus spread throughout the world. This new strain was called the Type S influenza and would also have disastrous results. With the war finally coming to a close then, humanity once again set their eyes on the final frontier, space. Before the Reconstruction War, work had begun on Yggdrasil, the 4th generation International Space Station. Due to the war, construction was temporarily put on hold, but resumed shortly after the conflict was finally resolved. Cosmic Era 10. Many nations on Earth decide to heavily invest in the idea of space colonies, and for their construction, work begins on the lunar base Copernicus. At around the same time then, the Atlantic Federation announced the birth of their newest military branch, the FSF, or Federal Space Force. Not to be outdone, the Eurasian Federation and Republic of East Asia would soon unveil their own counterparts. Cosmic Era 11. The International Space Station Yggdrasil is completed. Cosmic Era 12. The lunar base Copernicus is completed, making it the first inhabitable lunar city. And the Federal Aeronautics and Space Administration, or FASA for short, announces their Jupiter exploration project. Going back 16 years before Cosmic Era 1 then, George Glenn was born. A seemingly unimportant event at the time, but this child would go on to get his PhD from MIT at the age of 17. He also became a star athlete, winning gold at the Olympics, as well as becoming a famous American football player. And he would even become an ace pilot in the Air Force. It really was one thing after another with George, and people were beginning to look forward to what would be the next achievement for this Homo Universalis. Cosmic Era 15. While on board the Tsiolkovsky, a spaceship he himself made to explore Jupiter, he made an announcement that would shock the world. All of his achievements weren't just due to his own talent or hard work, but instead, his genes had been altered as a fetus. And as if that wasn't shocking enough, he even distributed the treatment he underwent on the net. There is little doubt that he did all of this with the best intentions, but unfortunately, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Overnight, the already divided Earth erupted in chaos, as yet another division had been added to the cesspool. And the first seeds for humanity's next great conflict were sown, with unmodified humans on one side, the so-called naturals, and the modified humans on the other side, the so-called coordinators. And also on board this ship was another, at the time, seemingly innocuous piece of technology, a space work suit that was equipped with an exoskeleton. And the name of this suit was the Mobile Suit. Cosmic Era 16. The United Nations bans human genetic engineering, but despite this ban, illegal coordinators are still made in various places. It was also around this time that Blue Cosmos began to transition from being an environmentalist group to being an anti-coordinator group, with their biggest backer being the Azrael Foundation from the Atlantic Federation. 1 year later, they were also, allegedly, behind the attack on a Chicago lab where coordinators were being produced in secret. Everyone inside was massacred, and the building was burned to the ground. Cosmic Era 17. The Atlantic Federation and United States of South America begin work on the Port of Panama mass driver in Central America. Cosmic Era 21. The Eurasian Federation and South African Union begin work on the hapless mass driver on the shore of Lake Victoria. Cosmic Era 22. Siegel Klein is born in the Kingdom of Scandinavia, and George Glenn causes yet another unintended disruption. After reaching Jupiter, he discovers the first ever fossil of an alien life form. Dubbed Evidence 01, the fossil resembles a terrestrial whale, but with what appears to be wings. He is ordered by the FASA to bring it back for further research. Cosmic Era 23. Patrick Zola is born in the Atlantic Federation. Cosmic Era 29. George Glenn returns to Earth, along with the controversial Evidence 01. It is meticulously studied in the 5th research colony called Zodiac, but they cannot find any evidence of the fossil being faked. They can only conclude that it is a genuine alien species, and in addition to that, they believe that this life form had an intelligence equal or higher than that of a whale. This again caused an uproar amongst the religious hardliners. George Glenn is also detained until they figure out what to do with him, given his very unique situation. Cosmic Era 30. With shifting societal pressures, humanity begins to warm up to the idea of coordinators, and the ban on making them was repealed. The first coordinator boom had begun, and everything seemed to be going great for them. And what also boomed this year were space colonies. Many colonies were being worked on this year, with one of them being the Mendel colony at Lagrange 4. And finally for this year, Orr began work on the Kaguya mass driver and Heliopolis resource satellite. Cosmic Era 31. George Glenn is released and immediately joins the researchers at Zodiac to examine Evidence 01. Gradually, Zodiac is becoming one of the premier research facilities in space. Cosmic Era 35. Other nations find out that the Atlantic Federation was building a military base on the moon's Ptolemaeus crater. Despite the Federation's claims that this was merely a police station, but in space, they are internationally condemned for bringing weapons into space. Shortly after this, they unveiled their first mobile armors, prompting the first space arms race. In the same year, the Eurasian Federation would begin construction of their Artemis military base, signaling, truly, the beginning of the militarization of space. Cosmic Era 38. The Zodiac Research Facility has now become a large-scale operation, and several others like it were built. It was also this year that George Glenn made yet another milestone achievement. He created a concept for a new type of hourglass-shaped colony. This new colony type is readily accepted, and construction of them quickly begins at Lagrange 5. The main investors are the Atlantic Federation, Eurasian Federation, and Republic of East Asia. And their main goal is to have these serve as research facilities and factories. So rather than having their own government, they would be ruled over by said nations, hereafter referred to as the sponsor nations. And as a tool to ensure their subservience, the plants themselves were forbidden from producing their own food, making them reliant on those sponsor nations for most of their basic necessities. In the 40s then, the previous coordinator acceptance movement would take a dramatic turn for the worst. With the first illegally made coordinators now in their 20s, they were dramatically outperforming their peers in academics, sports, and just about any other imaginable thing. And with the divide in the capabilities of coordinators versus naturals becoming ever more obvious, anti-coordinator sentiments also soared to an all-time high. It was at this time that anti-coordinator terrorism began in earnest, perpetrated by various extremist religious groups and other racist groups like Blue Cosmos. And these views would not remain restricted to just these groups, and by the mid-50s, Blue Cosmos succeeded in rooting itself within the leadership of both the Atlantic Federation and the Eurasian Federation, two of the most powerful blocs on Earth. Cosmic Era 41. Maruta Azrael is born in the Atlantic Federation, and the first of the so-called second-generation coordinators are born. These are naturally born coordinators from two first-generation coordinator parents, and it is discovered that they did inherit the enhanced genes of their parents. Cosmic Era 43. During the construction of the new colonies at Lagrange 5, Patrick Zala and Siegel Klein meet for the first time. And on November 29th, Mula Flaga is born, the son of Alda Flaga, who is a wealthy politician of the Atlantic Federation. Cosmic Era 44. The first 10 colonies of what would later become known as Aprilia City are completed. It was also at this point that they got their new designation, Plant, short for Productive Location Ally on Nexus Technology. Cosmic Era 45. The coordinator population exceeds 10 million, and more money is being pumped into the Plant project. Their productivity was excellent, and it was even said that there was nothing that couldn't be made in the plants. The only exception, of course, being food, for the aforementioned reasons. Another issue was that for this productivity, only coordinators were allowed in the plants. Something that, combined with anti-coordinator sentiments on Earth, caused a first wave of coordinator migration to those plants. And it was also around this time that anti-coordinator groups began perpetrating terroristic attacks in the plants. And since the plants barely had any weapons, due to design, they lacked the tools to effectively fight back against these terroristic activities. A state of affairs that led to widespread dissatisfaction amongst the citizens of the plants. Meanwhile, on Earth, several nations began creating these so-called combat coordinators in anticipation of a possible future conflict between naturals and coordinators. These humans were bred purely for combat, and to prevent them from defecting to the other side, they were subjected to severe mental conditioning. The program would end up being less than successful, as many did still defect, either to the coordinator side or to various mercenary groups, but rather than stopping, this would only lead them to find more effective ways of creating enhanced humans to fight against the unnatural and monstrous coordinators. Cosmic Era 46. Seeing his own son as inferior due to the DNA of his mother, Aldaflaga visits the Mendel colony. Since its creation, this place had become known as the Mecca of genetic research, and it was also where Garm R&D was located, one of the leading authorities when it came to all things DNA. Here, Aldaflaga met with the head researcher, Yulin Hibiki, and commissioned him to make a clone of him. Later this year, Raulaflaga is born. Cosmic Era 50. The Zodiac Alliance is formed by Patrick Zala, Siegel Klein, and other prominent coordinators. Their demands are very simple: independence for the plants, as well as the right to produce their own food and the right to self-defense. This movement was welcomed by many coordinators on the plants, but not so much by the sponsor nations. Much to the dismay of many coordinators, they of course suppressed the movement with all of their might. But the Zodiac Alliance wasn't gone, it was merely out of sight, slowly building up more power in the shadows. Cosmic Era 53. The Plant Supreme Council is formed, consisting of representatives from each colony, and George Glenn is assassinated by a natural boy. Supposedly, the child killed him because he was frustrated that he wasn't born as a coordinator. But there are many rumors that Blue Cosmos was actually behind the attack. Cosmic Era 54. Dr. Hibiki turns one of his wife's fertilized eggs into a coordinator, and a new strain of the Type S influenza appears. This mutation is dubbed the Type S2 influenza and is immune to all existing vaccines. As a result, the new disease quickly spreads and the death toll is immense. However, the disease only seemed to be affecting naturals, causing rumors to begin circulating that it was actually the coordinators who were spreading the virus as revenge for George Glenn's assassination, and by extension, as an attempt to eradicate all naturals. Religious groups, meanwhile, see it as a punishment from God for the affront that is the coordinator race. With all of these accusations combined then, anti-coordinator sentiment is the highest it has ever been, and the following year, the Turin Protocol is enacted, once again banning genetic modification on Earth. February 5th, Cosmic Era 55. Lacus Klein is born. May 18th. Kira and Kigali Hibiki are born on Mendel, but they won't be with their birth parents for long. Having caught wind of an upcoming Blue Cosmos terrorist attack, both children are entrusted to the care of their mother's sister, Karidot Yamato. Neither their father, Yulin Hibiki, nor their mother, Via Hibiki, would survive the attack. And because of the rising number of casualties caused by the Type 2 influenza, similar anti-coordinator attacks and riots become commonplace. October 29th. Athron Zala is born, and in one of the plants, Februaria City, coordinator researchers discover a vaccine against the Type 2 influenza. However, even after mass-producing it and supplying it to the Earth, the rumors persisted and anti-coordinator sentiment remained strong. Because of this, migration of coordinators to the plants now begins in earnest. Cosmic Era 57. The Federal Space Force, Eurasian Space Force, and Republic of East Asia Space Force jointly dispatch forces to the plants, forming a predecessor to the later Omni Enforcer. Cosmic Era 58. Siegel Klein and Patrick Zala are elected to the Plant Supreme Council, while also continuing their activities as the Zodiac Alliance. The group is getting more and more influential. Meanwhile in Orb, Uzumi Nara Alpha becomes the chief representative, and works begin on the orbital elevator called Ame no Mi Hashira. Cosmic Era 60. The plants become the main source of energy and manufactured goods for the nations on Earth. This leads to enormous profits for the sponsor nations, and they would continue to impose increasingly heavy quotas. But at the same time, it also earned them the ire of the other nations, who were increasingly critical of their monopoly. Cosmic Era 61. Patrick Zola is attacked by an anti-coordinator terrorist group, but survives. Fearing for the safety of his son, he sends Athrun to study abroad in Copernicus City and hides his identity. Here, the boy meets Kira, and the two would quickly become best friends. Cosmic Era 63. Because of a Blue Cosmos terrorist attack, the plants' energy production takes a momentary but severe hit. To deal with this situation, the Supreme Council requests for the energy quota to be temporarily suspended. However, none of the sponsor nations agree to this request, and the plants are plunged into a serious energy crisis. In response, a general strike is held by plant engineers. This peaceful protest, however, is met by the mobilization of the sponsor nations' mobile armor fleet. Voices for plant independence grow increasingly louder, and under the leadership of Siegel Klein and Patrick Zola, research begins on possible military applications of mobile suits. Cosmic Era 65. The first prototype for a combat mobile suit was rolled out, and the Zodiac Alliance grows larger both in size and in scope. It was also at this time that they changed their name to the Zodiac Alliance of Freedom Treaty, or ZAFT for short. Cosmic Era 67. The YMF-01B Proto-Jin is rolled out and becomes the first ever combat-ready mobile suit. And a part of Maya City is secretly converted into a factory to begin producing them. Cosmic Era 68. Members of ZAFT are now the majority on the Supreme Council, and one of their members, Siegel Klein, is elected as the new chairman. They now begin prioritizing the right to self-govern and trade autonomy. 1 month later, they go public with this new direction at a meeting with the sponsor nations. They do not take kindly to this, and again mobilize their fleet. But by now, the plants have their own fleet, allowing them to respond in kind. For the time being though, this merely results in a standoff. But the plants weren't the only ones bolstering their forces. Blue Cosmos membership swelled to hundreds of thousands, and the persecution of coordinators on Earth only continued to get worse. That is, for the ones still living there, because for understandable reasons, by this time, most had migrated to the plants. In an attempt then to get more supporters in their camp, Chairman Klein secretly went to the United States of South America and the Oceania Union for trade agreements concerning food imports and industrial product exports. The sponsor nations quickly found out about this and were outraged. They demanded Chairman Klein to step down, the Supreme Council to be disbanded, and the plans to give up any and all ideas of independence. When they refused to move on any of these points, the sponsor nations restricted food exports to the plants and even went as far as shooting down a plant-owned cargo fleet that was transporting food from South America to the plants. Hundreds of coordinators died, and this became known as the Mandelbrot incident. Tensions between the plants and the sponsor nations were at an all-time high, and things weren't about to die down this time. In response to the Mandelbrot incident, Patrick Zola fused ZAFT with the plants' militia, turning them from a mere political pressure group into a fully fledged military force, with mobile suits as their ace in the hole. He also decides to call Athrun back to the plants. Athrun then invites Kira to join him, but he chooses to stay at Copernicus for the time being. The two best friends vow to see each other again and say their goodbyes. Given the rapidly deteriorating situation though, the Yamatos also decide that staying at Copernicus isn't the best idea and move to Heliopolis. Also in Cosmic Era 68, an unspecified biohazard incident happens at the Mendel colony, causing many casualties and even GARM R&D as a whole to go bankrupt. The colony is abandoned and then sterilized with a large amount of X-ray radiation. Rumors float around that Blue Cosmos was somehow involved with the incident, but nothing was ever substantiated. Cosmic Era 69. Chairman Klein orders food to be produced at the plants, and Junius 7 through 10 are converted to agricultural plants, mainly focusing on grain production. When the sponsor nations find out about this, they first try to threaten the plants into submission, but when this gives no results, they again dispatch their fleet. This time, however, things would play out very differently. The plants not only unveiled the existence of Zaft, being their de facto military, but also the existence of their top secret weapon, the ZGMF-1017 Jin, an upgraded version of the YMF-01B Proto-Jin. Despite being at an incredible numerical disadvantage, these new mobile suits were able to run circles around the mobile armors of the sponsor nations and completely wiped out their fleet, and even managed to drive them out of planned airspace completely. Seeing the effectiveness of these mobile suits then, Captain Halberton of the Atlantic Federation's 4th Fleet, later the 8th Fleet of the Earth Alliance, submits a report on them to the Federation's military HQ. The report details their combat prowess in space, and concludes by saying that the Federation should also invest in their own mobile suit program. His report is disregarded, but not by everyone. Together with some members of the Federation's Congress, he is able to get his mobile suit program on track. Development starts for the Federation's G-weapons. And seemingly unrelated to this at the time, Kira Yamato enrolls in Heliopolis' Industrial College. In the wake of the attack, Chairman Klein again demands full independence and fair trade deals for the plants. However, despite several attempts to negotiate a deal between them and the sponsor nations refuse to budge. And so, the plants put up an ultimatum. Should no favorable answer be given by January 1st, Cosmic Era 70, the plants will unilaterally stop exporting any goods to Earth. January 1st, Cosmic Era 70. With the deadline rapidly approaching, a delegation from the plants is sent to meet with representatives of the sponsor nations. However, while on their way, they fall victim to a terrorist attack, and one of the delegates is killed. Blue Cosmos claims the attack, but it is soon revealed that it was actually the sponsor nations who were behind this attack. This incident would become known as the Unheld Meeting. As promised, the plans halt all exports, and the sponsor nations who were so reliant on those goods face a sudden economic crisis. To further increase anti-coordinator and anti-plan sentiments then, many governments on Earth now begin to actively create propaganda against them. February 5th, the United Nations call for negotiations to be held to reconcile the two parties. Both agree to meet at Copernicus, but disaster strikes. A terrorist bombing wipes out everyone present at the meeting. This being the UN leadership and the representatives from Earth. The representative from the plants, Siegel Klein, was spared because his shuttle was delayed due to a convenient problem. February 7th. For the Atlantic Federation, the shuttle problem was a bit too convenient, and they accused the plants of being the ones who staged the terrorist attack. They make the Alaska Declaration. In it, they say that this attack by the plants was not just a declaration of war against the Earth, but against all naturals. With the UN leadership wiped out, the organization is now replaced by the Earth Alliance. At the same time, Uzumi Nara Alta, chief representative of Orb, declares that no matter what happens in the future, Orb will remain independent and neutral. February 11th, Cosmic Era 70. The newly formed Earth Alliance declares war on the plants, and immediately thereafter, an attack fleet launches from the Ptolemaios lunar base. The flagship of this fleet is Roosevelt, and on board are nuclear missiles.